Matt from USA Warrior Stories. We're here in Southampton, New York at the Southampton Arts Center for a tour of John Monsky's incredible collection of American flags, textiles, and more. Hosted by Christina Strassfield. We will be joined by local veterans, hear their stories, and hear their comments of having this exhibition in our community. USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another, and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
My name is Christina Strassfield, and I'm the Executive Director of the Southampton Arts Center. Our mission is building community through the arts, so we're always excited to welcome the community. The idea for this exhibition came about when the mayor and his assistant went to visit John Monsky. She called me right away and said, "You must go see John Monsky's collection. He has an amazing collection of American flags." I went to visit him here in Southampton, and I immediately realized this had to be shown to the public. So I said to him, "Would you be interested in doing a show next summer?" He thought about it for about a minute, and he said, "Yes, I'd love to do it." He said, "Because I'm only the caretaker for these flags. They belong to everyone, and they're going to be preserved for the next generation to be shown in museums and to be donated to a museum." He started collecting when he's about 6 or 7 years old, and a lifelong passion, and he has all of this work. He has donated to various museums already, but the collection is quite amazing, and it's the first time he's showing the entirety to us in the community. I was very excited because he had works from George Washington's time, Abraham Lincoln, D-Day, Vietnam, going through Afghanistan, and Flight 93. So it is something for everyone to see. This is history. History is coming alive on the walls of the Southampton Arts Center. Some of the key pieces that I wanted to point out were this one, which is the flag from D-Day, which was actually on board the ship, and the reconnaissance map that was being used. The fact that this map is still in existence, a work on paper, is extraordinary. The craft of the flag is quite amazing. Looking at it, it's torn and it's tattered, but it's still flying very, very high. This is an amazing one too. This is a flag from the Civil War. And this was Mark Twain actually took this flag. It was on a riverboat. And during his time, he saved it. And it was just noting what happened during the Civil War and how that affected his writing. The oldest piece in the collection is this flag that was George Washington. So this is before we became a country. And the idea of independency. Instead of Independence Day, where we say we have independency, it's George Washington. He's shown on a horse, again in military regalia. The horse is rearing up, but there's certain symbols. The idea of "don't tread on me." We have that here. We also have what was the beginning of a flag, what we know of the 13 colonies. But again, there's no stars on this particular flag. And the pine tree, which was a symbol of the New England states. So I think that's a very exciting opportunity for us to share.
That's fabulous, just fabulous.
And this particular piece, it's called a kerchief. So I said, is this something that was actually worn? Because when you're looking at this one, it doesn't look like something you'd actually wear. And he said, no, this was almost like what we'd have, like a contemporary political sign that we would put in the ground. That's what it was. So you would put it in the window of your home, or you would have it above your fireplace, something like that. It was not something that would have actually been worn. But the first piece that he collected is around the corner, and that is the Teddy Roosevelt kerchief. And that one looks like a kerchief that you might have actually worn around your neck, so a little bit different.
So this actually dates back to the American Revolution.
Yes.
Look at the condition.
I know. He has collected and, again, has really tried to preserve and protect this for the future generation. So he spent a lot of money conserving these flags, framing them, and making sure that, again, and sharing with them with the community. This is the wonderful piece, which was the first piece that his mother bought for him. And it has the TR for Teddy Roosevelt. And I didn't even realize it until I looked very closely. There's Teddy Roosevelt's face with the cowboy hat on, with the mustache, the glasses, and then the hat again is repeated once again here. So this one looks like a real kerchief, like someone might have actually worn it. So the whole idea of the Rough Riders actually wearing something around their neck like that. Of course, Teddy Roosevelt has the history with us in Montauk. So I think it's wonderful. He told a story that he said that for some reason, he thought that his mother had paid $25 for it. And she said, "Are you kidding me? I would have never spent more than $5 to buy this." So the first part of this collection started with this $5 kerchief, which I think is amazing. I just want to show these four in this room because these are all, again, political, like instead of having a contemporary bumper sticker or something that you would put in the ground, in this case, these four flags are very important because it's all of the candidates that we're running against with Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln, John Breckinridge, John Bell, and Stephen Douglas, they were all running at the same time. And he's one of the few people he knows that has all four of those political flags.
And this, I love this one as well because it shows all of the major generals, and at the time, you know, we had McClellan here as the head guy, the guy that just wouldn't get off his duff and go out there and take on the South, and how he ended up with Grant. Yeah. Lincoln was a patient man and was very patient with George McClellan until he wasn't patient anymore.
He wasn't anymore.
And this is one of the flags from Lincoln's time. Again, in the stars, you see where it says free.
Yeah.
Instead of having, you know, the 13 stars.
Oh, wait, you have to look at it.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
It says free there.
That's wonderful.
And the one star in the corner is that we should all be unified as one, which I thought was really, again, a beautiful sentiment. This, I think, is something that we are all familiar with. The idea that we're all very familiar with Blue Star families and Gold Star families. So again, he collected this. This is from World War I, and he said that he grew up in Florida by a Navy base. So he said he always remembers seeing in the community centers where they would have something like this, how many of the young men were serving. So again, in this case, it was the boys from our block. There were 14 young men who were serving. Obviously, in this case, many more, but 2 that passed away. So we have the Gold Star going forward. I'm a very proud parent. My son is in the Army, and my daughter-in-law, they met at West Point and graduated. They're captains of the Army, and so I have my 2 blue stars right there in my home as well.
They're Academy grads?
Yes.
So am I. Yeah, a few years before them, but all right, Bob.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. Very proud of their service and your service. So this room, again, John felt that having grown up in Florida, he said he grew up in the shadows of NASA and the Vietnam War. And he said that what he found was there were so many links between the astronaut corps and, of course, the Vietnam War, because this was the same time. So the young men who served in NASA often came from the military academy, West Point, from Annapolis, and from the Air Force. And he said that so many of the astronauts and people that he met felt tremendous guilt because they said while their pictures were on the front page of the newspapers, their comrades in arms, the young men that they were in the military academies with, were serving in Vietnam. So again, their pictures were on the front page of the paper, and these men were risking their lives, you know, in very different ways. So it was really, I think, very, very meaningful for John to collect all this material. And I think when you look at some of the imagery, again, it is extraordinary. So we have this particular one, the helicopter, which is an airlifting of the wounded soldiers, and this is the flag from that division. And I think it's such a moving photograph because the man here, the military, the basket which is taking the wounded soldiers is going up. You can see that the other men are wounded and they're being about, once the basket comes down, they'll be moving up again, which I think is quite amazing. What also struck me again is that I remember seeing on the news, you know, the Vietnam War and the idea of the jungle, but when you're seeing that picture, I think it's extraordinary. I mean, what these young men had to live through and what they had to endure in that kind of an environment is something that we're not familiar with. I'm not familiar with personally, but have seen
That
it.
picture tells you the canopy jungle was probably triple canopy. The helicopters couldn't land. So they had to drop the baskets to pull the guys out. And that's when they were most vulnerable.
And they're very vulnerable at that point.
Yeah. That triple canopy jungle, nothing got through, not even daylight.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. Again, one of the flags that was on the boats there, quite amazing. And then again, here we see the photograph of, again, the draft. People don't understand today when we talk about the draft, what was that? These were young, 18 and 19-year-old young men. And, we don't know if these young men made it back, but it's quite amazing.
My grandson took a trip from school a couple of weeks ago down to the Vietnam War. And he was there. He was a freshman at Shippensburg out in Pennsylvania. And they were looking at the wall, and one of the guides came over and was talking to him. And he said to them, "How old are you guys?" And they said they were 20, 21. And she turned around and said to them, "So 80% of these kids on the wall."
Mm.
It's amazing.
You notice anything strange about that shirt?
About the shirt?
Yeah.
It's not a jungle fatigue, that's for sure.
Not a jungle shirt, no.
Yeah. He's also got its patch in color.
Yeah, so it's early. But I never saw a short sleeve shirt the whole time I was there. Or ever in the military did I ever see a short sleeve
That's right, we used to roll them up.
Yeah, we had, we didn't when we were stateside, but, well, maybe they did, but I wouldn't, but we all had our except the monsoon season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, the Vietnam veterans, when they came, unfortunately, were not given the respect that they deserved and were not treated respectfully. And again, there was the counterculture of the peace movement. And this was a company that made the same flag that you see there, the Ecology Flag, that had traditionally been doing straight American flags. And they did this version, which was the love flag and also the peace flag. There was one with the peace symbol in it. But we felt that having all of this together was important. The other side has, again, historical material from the space movement. Again, we start out with early material. We have Amelia Earhart's flag. So Amelia Earhart took a number of these small flags with her on her transatlantic journey. Then she published a book, and she put them in the book. John went around buying every book that he could until he found one that had an American flag in it. But there's a fragment of her plane, her actual airplane, and there's a fragment of the material from the Wright brothers' plane as well. So again, the precursors to space flight, which I think is truly amazing. Again, this is from the Gemini mission, Jim McDavid's flag. And this is from astronaut Ed White, was writing to the West Corps. He was a West Point cadet, and he was going to be addressing the Corps. And this is his speech that he wrote on an envelope, which then he gave, it was obviously written up, but this was his original notes talking about the relationship. I remember when we went to West Point and we went to the cemetery there, he is buried, and then two plots down is his brother who died in Vietnam.
I came back from Vietnam in February of 1970, and I never had any negativity from anybody in this community.
This community wasn't bad. I don't remember anybody saying anything bad, but you were on guard anyway.
Yeah. So
I had it. I went out to the Presidio in California to get an award at the end of my time in early 1967, or mid-1967. I got off the plane in San Francisco, and about 50 hippies, whatever, spit on me. I was in my dress blue uniform to get the award. And that stayed, to my mind, that stayed on for the next 15 or 20 years. Yeah. There was negative feelings about it. The thing that fascinated me in the whole thing about the flag, talking about the flag for a second, is that as a kid I learned in Catholic grammar school, we said our prayers every morning on Long Island, and then we would do the Pledge of Allegiance every day. So I learned early on to respect the flag, okay? I signed up, and I was on board as a young lieutenant January 1st, 1965. My job was a unique job, basically, relatively unique. I was a survivor assistance officer stationed in South Carolina, native Long Island in my whole life, down South Carolina. And now survivor assistance then, before the war had built up and there were casualties, people died of old age, and I'd go out a month after the death to help the widow take care of their financial affairs. That was it. Then we started getting casualties in. The notifications were made in those days initially by the Western Union Telegram. I'd follow 24 hours later to talk to them. They were still destroyed, but they had a 24-hour alert. March 15th, 1966, they changed that around. They had officers go out and make the notifications. I spent the rest of my time dealing with death every day. But the fascinating thing was that, we'd seen all the protests around the country. Every morning you'd wake up and there'd be a protest about whatever, and it would be a lot of flag burning at that point, right? And then I look around, and I had, if anybody might be tempted to burn their flag, is the mom and dad of a soldier killed in Vietnam, right? 18, 19 years old. I was 22, 23 years old. There was only one soldier of the 210 notifications that I made that basically was older than me, 27, a staff sergeant. Everyone else was younger than me, 18, 19, or 20. But yet, I found they always had me sitting on the stool next to the casket for the funeral services or at the wake, and every person that came by, the flag-draped casket, they would come by and they'd touch the flag. Not in anger, they would touch it sort of to give them strength. And I saw occasionally they'd clutch it like that. It was like a cry for help me get through this. But never anger, never once. And those are the people, if anybody had a reason to be angry, it would be them. And they weren't. They loved the flag. That's my main memory from that period in Vietnam.
I'd like to just add, just on an earlier point that you made about being out in San Francisco at that time, on our honor flights where we take veterans down to D.C. to see their memorials, many Vietnam veterans expressed the fact that when they left Vietnam and came back to Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco, many of them said that they were advised and told to change out of their uniform and get into civilian clothes before they actually left the airbase because of the turmoil and the unrest and the uncertainty of how they would be received once they were away from the military facility. And I just like one last thing too, because you think of all these things as we're doing this is why this is so wonderful. This is great. But just speaking about the youth that were over there fighting the battles, one of the things that Maya Lin, who designed the memorial, Vietnam Memorial, which was just, the replica was just in East Hampton, as a matter of fact, she wanted, in terms of how the names would be presented, she did it chronologically from the beginning of the war to the end, and it starts at the center of the apex of the two sides of the wall, with the very first death attributed to the Vietnam War, which is dated in 1955, I believe, is the very first one. And it goes around from one end to the other and then comes back up on the east wall to the very last Vietnam casualty in 1975. And she wanted those two to meet, at the center of the wall as sort of a symbolic beginning and ending, yin and yang of that conflict, and she was brilliant. She was, 20 years old, I think, when she won that competition?
She was still in school,
She was still in
and
school.
her teacher gave her a B on the project. Well, this wall, again, is very exciting because it does show you the NASA, what was happening. So the picture that you see above is the people who went to Sears Roebuck and bought American flags for $5. What they're doing is they realized when they were going to put it on the moon, they had to have one pole going straight and one pole going like this. So they had to cut part of the flag off. And I don't know how we got this or how they even thought to save this fragment of the flag. But right now, the 3 flags that were planted on the moon are all white because of the radiation. And so there's no color left in them. So this is the only flag that has color. It didn't go to the moon, but is the remnant of it, which I think is just like kind of an interesting element. I love this one. Neil Armstrong, before he went out, his heartbeat was 70 beats per minute. When he put his foot down, the electrocardiogram was 160 beats per minute. The first heartbeat from another planet. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. You never think about that.
It's funny because when they were actually landing and they were broadcasting about how they were going to put the American flag on it, that was in 1970, and I was over in Northern Ico in Vietnam, and we were listening to it on little transistor radios, and it was a live broadcast. And we were trying to explain to the Vietnamese scouts that there were Americans on the moon planting an American flag. And they thought we were just crazy or on drugs. They had no idea what we were talking about. But it was really funny. But we actually got to hear the whole thing live. And those poor guys were looking at us like... Took them a while to figure out it was real.
Around noontime, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was almost midnight here.
Yeah.
12 hours difference.
A story that I had never heard was when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were on the moon. They were allowed to bring a backpack, and the backpack somehow got loose and ruined the little stick that they needed to ignite so that they could get back to the Earth. Could you imagine this? So they tell NASA this. They go out for the moon landing. They come back. They discover this. NASA says, "Don't worry. Go to sleep for 4 hours. When you wake up, we'll have a solution." They wake up 4 hours later, there's no solution from NASA. So Buzz Aldrin, who's like sort of the cowboy, as they say, he was trying to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So they had these pens that were felt tip, has Velcro on it. This one is actually not Neil Armstrong's. This is the one from Alan Bean, but it's this type of pen. So Buzz Aldrin said, we're going to stick this in and we're going to use this as the mechanism to get back to the Earth. I was like, I'd never heard that story before, and I was like, amazing. These are flags that, again, each astronaut is allowed to bring like sort of a small amount of things with them. And these are flags from all of the Apollo missions. This is a Vatican flag because one of the astronauts was Catholic and he brought a Vatican flag with him, which I think was kind of exciting. So again, as we were talking about it, the first time people really got to see a picture of the Earth was from when the astronauts went to the moon and were able to shoot back. And the astronauts said it was like one planet, one beautiful planet that we have to protect forever. So they made, in California, the company made the first ecological flag, which is a green background and another green on the stripes. So something unusual that we get to see.
This is an excellent example.
Oh, thank you, thank you. There's just one more room, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I don't know how much time you have. So this room has a sort of a mixture of a lot of different things, starting with Civil War, first Black Regiment over there. The flag underneath it, the 25, was a regimental flag for a Black regiment. Behind us we have from the Constitution from the War of 1812. If you go to Boston, the boat is still there, and this was the banner that was flying from the original boat. This was a flag that was used. The man Colonel Aiken, who was the person who defended John Wilkes Booth against, who shot Abraham Lincoln. He was the one, he was the minister at that time of the Army, and this was a flag that he had commissioned. So again, it's quite amazing. More recent, we have again another flag from D-Day over here. And these are amazing. These are the photographs that we were talking about earlier, the Robert Capa photographs. So Robert Capa was on a boat. He was on the boat. He was right behind all of the soldiers. And you can see him taking the photograph from behind the soldiers here. So this whole first section is he's taking the photographs from behind. Then he gets to the side, and you can see all the soldiers in the water as they are reaching the shoreline here. He was in the thick of the battle as a reporter, a photographer. He ended up going on another boat. The boat got bombed. The minister that was with him and the medical that was with him got blown apart. But he thought to take from the boat that he was rescued from, he thought to take the American flag. And so that's the flag that was actually, again, saved him on the boat that saved him on D-Day, which I think is quite amazing. Those are from the Civil War again, more Civil War there. And I think the most for us, again, it's something that is very, very important. This was from the first memorial from Flight 93 right after 9/11, the Flight 93 that went down in Pennsylvania. The first memorial service that they had, they created this special flag.
There was a woman from Sag Harbor, park's named after her, whom I dated. And I used to joke about her. She was into sports cars and racing and karate. And I had to imagine she was one of the people that rushed him, because I used to call her the macho chick. Right, and I always felt she deserved better than what she got.
You know, again, those were amazing heroes. I mean, what they did, realizing at that moment what was happening, to have that.
Well, they decided how they were going to go out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it's a wonderful testament to them. John said that Carlos Rivera was a young man who worked for him and the company that he was with. And he wanted to go to Afghanistan, so he volunteered for the Army. He ended up going. He served in Afghanistan. He was with the Navy SEAL Team 4, and they said to him, you know, be very careful. You know, we understand that you want to serve. When you come back, you'll have a job for life. Don't worry about it. The three men within his group passed away. He was the only one who did make it back. And so again, a wonderful testament, and Carlos Rivera signed his name there with SEAL Team 4. And the flag was the flag that they laid out so that the helicopter could know where to land. So again, these are all, you know, amazing. When you hear all this again, it's history.
This is totally invaluable. This is excellent.
Thank you for saying. I felt like when I saw it immediately, I just knew that we have to share this with the community, get as many people in, get as many groups coming in to see this, because it's so important, and to learn about our history. History is very important. I'm a first generation. My parents were immigrants to this country. They became American citizens, and I remember the passion my parents had, for the American flag. It was something that we always respected, so I really feel like it's so important for us all to really understand and have respect for the flag.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
My name's Tom Guldi. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was in the Army from 1970 to 72, in Vietnam from 71 to 72. I was in the Trang, and then for the last week, they brought me back to Cam Ranh Bay. And we flew out of Cam Ranh Bay down to Long Binh, which we transfer out of. Get to Long Binh, and there is a lot of explosions going on. I'm thinking, is somebody going to hand me an M16 and tell me to get out on the perimeter or something? And that didn't happen. But what I had no idea was that the Cam Ranh Bay got hit just after I left. 24 killed one night. And my parents heard this on the news. And they weren't, they were worried that I would be one of the 24, which obviously I wasn't. And we got out quite a bit early. Because we were at the end of it in 1972. And so I didn't tell him I was coming home. But in all of this, I didn't know till I got home that those 24 people got killed. And I walked into the house, and my mother was, stunned. And then my father came home from work and he was really stunned and relieved. Years later, I talked to one of the guys that still was there, and he said they hit the barracks next to our company area. And he said, and that's, it was so close to where we were. And it makes me think that a lot of us got complacent.
Talk a little bit about the importance of having exhibits like this in our community.
One of the things that stands out when I see this is how little people realize the sacrifice people go. I remember talking to my wife one time when it was Desert Storm, and I said, I know what those guys are thinking. They're looking out there, and the enemy's out there, and what's going to happen. And some of the things that some of the guys had gone through, people have not a clue, and or don't care, and that's disturbing. I look at it as I was lucky. A lot of people say thank you for your service, and all. Well, okay, but I didn't get my arms and my legs blown off. I came back alive. And I can, live a decent life afterwards. A lot of these guys can't. And I think, there's a certain guilt that the rest of us have that we didn't make the sacrifice, those guys did.
Do you want to tell a story about your friend since they're in front of the
Yeah,
flag?
her name was Linda Grunlin. She lived in Sag Harbor. She had worked at the college. I went out with her for a while. And she was a pretty energetic young lady. I don't know how old she was at the time. I think she's probably about 30. The park is named after her on Route 114. And like I said before, all I can think of, she was one of the ones that would have rushed. I can't imagine she was. I don't know the details other than what we all know, that they rushed the terrorist and kept it from going. I think that one was going to the Capitol, and so that didn't happen. So the Capitol's intact because of those people who made a big sacrifice and decided how they would go. And you know, I think of her frequently. I think of her every time I drive down 114 past the park. And I also think about her family a lot. Because when you talk about this, or if you look at the wall, the Vietnam veterans, the names that aren't on there are the families, right? You know, you see those, 58,000, I think 280. And then with those, there's, you know, girlfriends, wives, daughters, sons, and parents that all suffered. And that's, I think, there's a lot of degree that's forgotten.
Yeah, my name is Bob Edel. I've lived out in Hampton Bays for 75 years. And I'd like to specifically reference one thing about this exhibit that they're having here for the recognition of the flags. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to react to what was going to be here, because I'm a Civil War buff. I study it, I go down, I'm a reenactor. I've been involved with it for a lot of years, and I was curious as to what are they going to do about the flags in 1861 to 1865, when the southern states had their own flag. And I found it very interesting. I encourage anybody on the East End to make sure they see this exhibit, because the flags and the exhibit material itself, including the photographs, start with George Washington and work their way right on through to 9/11 and the war on terrorism and all. So it covers the whole spectrum of the United States history. But when I think about it, in 1861, our country was fractured to the point where we actually split, and the southern states came up with their own flags. And if you read the letters and the documents that the Southerners published and used when they wrote home and all, their disrespect for the American flag, because they had their own flag with the stars and bars, it didn't take long for those guys to come up with statements that they had no respect, and they just really thought the whole thing was despicable. And I was just curious as to whether or not they were going to have any Southern flags here as part of the history of the country relative to the flag. And I guess maybe I'm glad it's not here, because it represents a time when we were in trouble. And I'd hate to think that we're fractured enough now that some people may be talking about those kinds of things. Obviously not to the same extent, but it happened once before, and I don't want to ever see it again. That flag is the emblem. That's the glue that holds us together. It shows us the past, and it brings us right up to the future. And I hope that every American remembers that and never forgets it.
And you yourself are a veteran? You served
Yeah,
as
I was in Vietnam in 1969 and 1970, and I thought I got off light. As I was explaining to one of the other vets, my MOS, my military occupational specialty, was communications. So I figured, communications, stay back and hang out with the radio guys. Well, 3 weeks into country, they were running out of people, so they changed me to 11 Bravo, which every veteran knows is it's a grunt, yeah. They said, congratulations, we don't need radio guys, and they put me on a 60 machine gun. And as one of the other speakers said, I agree with them 100%. The real heroes are the guys, and even the nurses and girls that are on the wall. The rest of us got home. Some of us paid a different price than others. Some are still paying the price for it today. But the bottom line was, it was a very difficult time, and the flags represent it.
Sure. My name is Bill Jones, and I grew up in Sag Harbor, went to West Point, and graduated in 1972. And the Vietnam War was winding down at that point. As a matter of fact, I don't believe that anyone from my class went over. Maybe there's somebody that I don't know about, but I don't believe anybody did, because in January of '73 is when the peace accords were signed in Vietnam. So things were over. I served 3.5 years in Germany in a Hawk missile unit, and then came back stateside for my last year down at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. And I didn't serve in country, but I am a Vietnam era veteran, and that's how I always refer to myself, as an era veteran, not a Vietnam veteran.
So let's talk a little bit about this exhibit and the importance of bringing things like this into our community.
Well, this is amazing. This display is absolutely it just enthralls you, if you're anybody associated with the military, certainly, but also just as an American citizen, to see these things that you wouldn't think exist, and then you find out that they do. It's totally amazing, and I've loved seeing the exhibit. And it just, it not only warms my heart, but it just brings history to life.
Now, you brought us over to this particular part of the exhibit. What caught your eye about this?
Well, there were a lot of choices here, Matt, and I actually ended up choosing this one as I walked around because this was the beginning. This is what it brought our country about as an independent entity, and this guy here is highly responsible for making that happen, along with a lot of other founding fathers, but you know, he was out in the field making it all happen, and I have certainly great respect and admiration for what he did then and as president. And the fact that we were able to defeat the biggest and baddest Army and Navy of the time is an amazing story unto itself, and what he sacrificed and what he had to make happen in order for us to defeat the British is just one of those amazing American stories. And without some luck and the divine intervention of the good Lord, I don't think he could have done it. But also, as you look at these things and remember these particular wars, and the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, World War II, there's a lot of glory in that, but also as I've lived life and gotten a little bit more mature in my life, I understand that there was a lot of suffering that went along with that as well.
Yeah.
And we have to also appreciate that, because along with all of those good things came a lot of bad things for a lot of men and women throughout our history who signed up and said, I'll serve, but also not only did many pass because of those efforts, but also they brought a lot back from those wars that have been very difficult to deal with, and what we know today as post-traumatic stress. And so we have to, you know, think about them as well. But it's still amazing to me that so many throughout our history have got this attachment to our country. Sometimes I wonder where it comes from, but it's there. It seems to be innate to want to serve and say, yeah, I love this country, and I'm going to step up and do my part.